having a lot of challenges with the trend of anti-globalization prevailing, and also multilateral system of global governance is in slowing down and even in crisis sometimes. We actually want to find what are the really most important and maybe also low-hanging fruit that we can tackle with. And I think plastic pollution is one of the most pressing global issues, especially considering our common challenge. Climate change actually is highly related with this. So our shared goal of working towards a sustainable recovery, and also in the post-pandemic times, the volume of plastic waste is continue to grow. And yet, according to UNEP, only 9% of plastic waste has been reduced, has been actually, really has been handled. So building a more environmental friendly solution for plastics requires not only public-private partnership, but also joint initiative from stakeholders from all different sectors, including NGOs and international organizations, particularly like WTO. So this is highly relevant having this topic today. So in today's section, we explore ways and mechanism in tackling the global issue of plastic pollution, and advance proposals for more enhanced role of WTO in promoting sustainable plastic trade. So plastic is also heavily traded. I'm actually happy and very honored to introducing our panelists today. We gathered very highly distinguished panelists today from different parts of the world, and also representing different sectors. Ambassador Chad Blackman, permanent representative of Barbados to the UN and the WTO, and also Dr. Caroline Brickbeck, Director of Trade Environment SDGs. I remember working with Dr. Brickbeck, 2 years ago, and we actually had a WTO public seminar actually, starting to really pay more attention on this issue. And also we'll have Dr. John Nan, Secretary General of Green, Circular, and Inclusive, and also she's from All China Environment Protection Federation. And also, of course, Ms. Judy Russell, Senior Public Affairs Manager, Packaging and Sustainability at Nestle. So we have really a great panelists today. The panel, actually, the scope of our discussion today, we would like to cover some of the areas. I would like to maybe just propose that. What is the nature of the plastic trade, and how does it affect existing trade-related measures to reduce plastic pollution and waste? What are the gaps and limitations in current efforts? So that's one aspect that we could hope that our panel can share some ideas on that. And also, second is how improve the trade cooperation within the rules of a mechanism of the WTO would contribute to the domestic, regional, and global efforts to achieve SDGs. So particularly WTO, we're having a WTO forum. So this is really very important for WTO member countries to think about. How would the environment agenda factor in WTO reform? And what are the prospects and the challenges? Again, related with WTO. So what's the agenda on this? And what role, and of course we have a panelist from China too, so what role can China play in promoting trade policies conducive to the environment? So that just some of the questions that we have in mind. Of course, we are open to other issues and discussions as well. So perhaps I don't know if Ambassador Chad Blackman is on, and but if not, I think Caroline, maybe you can also start. Oh, you are great.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ambassador, Your Excellency. You are you are very familiar with the issue. Maybe you can open this panel discussion. Ambassador Blackman, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to all of you. By starting, I just want to put it into context. Of course, trade in plastics is a trillion-dollar industry. It contributes to millions of jobs in many developing countries, as well as serving as an avenue to diversify the economies and shifting to higher value-added production. A growing number of developing countries, of course, are crucial suppliers of inputs into the global plastics industry. For example, the oil and natural gas sectors, where 99.5% of plastics are known to be derivative of petrochemicals. Now, to put it into further perspective, developing countries are amongst those that have been most negatively impacted by plastics pollution. The tourism sector, on which many developing countries depend, including a number of small and developing states, is sensitive to issues which alter the pristine nature of such a product. As part of their climate adaptation and mitigation commitments, the obvious need to conserve the planet in an effort to stem the impact of climate change, countries have been actively seeking to highlight the challenges created by plastics. There are calls within the international environment discussions for a global treaty on plastics, as well as efforts made within multilateral environmental agreements to dialogue and amend existing agreements to include for standards or bans on plastics. Now, during the conference of the parties of the Basel Convention in 2019, governments amended the convention to include plastic waste in a legally binding framework, thereby making global trade in plastic waste more transparent and better regulated, as well as to ensure that the management of plastic waste is safer for human health and also the environment. The Partnership on Plastic Waste has also been established with an aim to rally stakeholders to implement the new measures and also to provide technical and financial assistance support to developing countries. Now, in an effort to stymie the impact of plastic, a group of WTO members launched the informal dialogue on plastics pollution and environmentally sustainable plastics trade. This initiative has thus far explored how the WTO can contribute to strengthening policy coherence, collective approaches amongst members, and improving technical assistance to developing countries in support of global efforts to reduce plastic waste and to move towards a circular plastics economy. WTO members have also been implementing trade-related measures which seek to reduce plastic pollution, such as through import restrictions. A number of these countries have been at the forefront of imposing and notifying bans on single-use plastics, for example, my own country, Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago. There are concerted efforts being made to transition to more efficient and environmentally friendly alternative to plastics. Whilst transitioning away from the excessive use of plastic into new alternatives does not come without its own complexities and challenges, there is a significant scope to benefit from these new economic opportunities. Countries have therefore moved towards more sustainable products like glass, pottery, ceramics, natural fibers, and paper. It is clear that there is a need for a balanced approach to mainstreaming environment and trade policy as it relates to plastics, a core part of which will need to be cooperation between international organizations like the United Nations Environment Programme and the World Trade Organization, as well as the provision of capacity and financial assistance to developing countries that need it most. To this end, I urge that more countries should co-sponsor the informal dialogue on plastics pollution and environmentally sustainable plastics trade. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ambassador Blackman. And it's really great that you emphasize this importance of this issue and how we can really work together on that and really take concrete actions. So it's good to have you open that. And now I'd like to have Dr. Brinkback, Caroline. I mean, you and I, we were actually 2019. We in Geneva at the Public Forum, we actually jointly hold a seminar on this issue. So I remember then. I mean, this wasn't really that high attention given to this topic. But now, after 2 years, I think particularly the world is more consensus now, conscious now on the climate change. I mean, at least for WTO and also the using and banning, and of course how we can trade this plastic thing, and there's a host of things that we could look at. So perhaps that you can give a bit of the perspective of the new plastic economy and how we can really this plastic supply chain and upstream problem and solutions, and of course the partnership between WTO and IGO and NGO such as UNEP as well. So of course you've been expert in this area for watching for a long time now. Dr. Brickbeck, it's your turn, please.
Great, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I'm just trying to share my slides, but it doesn't seem actually that it's possible. So I will proceed without them, which is fine. So the first thing that I wanted to mention today is, well, firstly, I wanted to thank Ambassador Blackman for putting the issue so well in context, because of course, there's a really strong environment dimension to this issue of trade and plastic pollution, but there's also a really important development dimension about how we move to a more environmentally sustainable plastics trade, and how we use trade policies in a way that are both effective and also fair in addressing plastic pollution. So the first point that I just wanted to underline is that on context is that plastic production is growing enormously. It's grown enormously over the last 50 years, and we're expecting it to quadruple by 2050. So this is in terms of the supply side or the upstream end. We're going to have more and more and more plastic in the global economy in the coming years if we continue business as usual. There are efforts now to recognize that we have a plastic pollution problem at the waste end of the plastic life cycle, and that is obviously a major contributor to ocean and marine plastic pollution. But there are also environmental issues along the life cycle of plastic, from those associated with fossil fuel extraction to the carbon intensity of plastic production, chemicals that are used in the plastic production processes and the impacts that they may have on communities living around plastic production facilities, and also the health impacts on those who at the waste end of the life cycle are affected by plastic waste in their communities and so on, and also in their fields. So for developing countries, even those who have no coastal environments within their national territories, plastic pollution can still be a huge issue because it clogs up sewage, it clogs up public infrastructure, it clogs up water streams, and it's pervasive in agricultural fields, which impacts agricultural productivity as well. So there's a range of reasons why we should care about plastic pollution, and the latest discussions among governments for this new UN environment or global agreement on plastic pollution is really has really underlined the need to take a life cycle approach. So that means looking downstream and also what we can do upstream to address pollution upstream, but also recognizing that even if we were only concerned about the downstream issues, we would need to look upstream as well, to look at the way that plastics are designed, the range of types of plastics that we have on the market, how we can reduce unnecessary use of plastic in products, and how we can make sure that they are as recyclable and reusable as possible. So this upstream part is really critical to solving the downstream issue. So just to touch quickly on the trade dimension, of course, we have trade across the life cycle of plastics, from fossil fuel feedstocks to virgin primary plastics, where over 50% of production is traded internationally. We have trade in plastic packaging, both in its own right as empty packaging and also packaging that's associated with prepackaged products and also used in transportation and distribution. And we also have millions of products that have plastics embedded in them, but that are difficult to trace in international trade statistics because they're not plastic products per se. They may be a car, or they may be a phone or household furniture, or all kinds of other products in which we have plastic. And of course, there's trade in plastic waste. Now, in a study that we did last year with UNCTAD, we showed that there's over $1 trillion in plastics trade. That's probably an underestimate because there's many types of plastic that flows across borders that we can't measure well. So it's more than 5% of the total value of global trade. Of that $1 trillion, only $3 billion of it is trade in plastic waste. And this doesn't mean we should underestimate the importance of that volume of plastic waste being traded internationally and to ensure that it's managed in an environmentally sound fashion. But it means that we've just got this other $1 trillion worth of trade in plastics that we need to understand better and understand where and how trade policy can help us push it in a direction that is more environmentally sustainable. And problem at the moment is we have a lot missing in terms of international trade cooperation on plastic. So we have this new plastic waste amendments to the Basel Convention that Ambassador Blackman mentioned, but it really just tackles the waste end of international plastic trade. So there's a lot more work to be done in terms of data and monitoring of trade flows, to understanding their relevance to efforts to reduce plastic pollution. Many countries are implementing important national responses, as Ambassador Blackman mentioned, but they're developed in an uncoordinated and disjointed manner, which can reduce effectiveness. Many of the exporters and companies that are trying to move towards greater sustainability face a really complex and divergent regulatory framework. And there's often poor transparency of what the sustainability standards are that you have to meet in order to trade internationally. We also have a lack of policy coherence that many countries are designing very ambitious domestic measures around plastic pollution, but they're not coupled with appropriate or with aligned trade policy measures. And finally, across this area, we've got too little attention to the challenges and opportunities facing developing countries on trade-related aspects of tackling plastic pollution, on the challenges of transformation and a just transition. And a key issue here is to note, as Ambassador Blackman has, that many countries are investing in different aspects of the plastic supply chain as a way to diversify economically and also to add value to their exports. So as we move to transition, we have to make sure that we find ways to ensure that they're not unfairly disadvantaged. I've just got 2 quick points to go. The first is that there are many different pathways for this cooperation. We can cooperate on trade through UN environmental processes, such as the Basel Convention and UNEA. We can do so regionally. We can do so in collaboration with businesses and NGOs that are in favor of a new circular plastics economy. But we can also do it at the WTO, as Ambassador Blackman has mentioned. So I think this informal dialogue on plastic pollution at the WTO is a really critical way that we can spur and catalyze discussion among members on the various options that they have at hand for tackling this. And I would hope in going forward that we can not only focus on sharing experiences and promoting transparency, but really looking for concrete actions that countries could take and that they could pledge to work on together voluntarily through cooperation at the WTO. I think that would be a really great step forward. And as I fear I'm speaking too long, I won't go now into my specific recommendations, but hopefully in the discussion, I could come back and tell you what I think some of the key things that could actually be done in the WTO context that would make a difference. Thank you, Dr. Van.
Great. Yeah, great. Thank you, Caroline, and for your great intervention as well. I think, yeah, you have been giving a lot of great perspective into this very urgent issue. I think that it's high time that all the countries and particularly WTO that we can really work together on this issue. I think this is something, as you said, has been explosive growth of production growth and even trading. Yet we really haven't found in fact a way of how we can really better contain this pollution of those plastics. So absolutely very important, but also a very key area that we can start with. So thank you. We'd like to hear from you later as well. Now I would like to also invite Dr. Jiang Nanchin to speak. She's of course expert in environment protection, but also knowledgeable on China. I mean, as we know that China's current plastic recycling industry is also developing, and gaps and also where can we really fit that in, and between national and global trade policy in plastics and business perspectives and China's experience in global trade regarding the plastic. So Dr. Jiang, you are the expert. I'd like to hear from you for this discussion. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair and panelists. I'm working in this plastic issue and recycling sector in the past 3 years. So here I would like to address on the recycling sector in China, and also the status that now China, what's going on for the international society to have more understanding. I think usually people know that China is the largest plastic production and the consumption country, and China banned imported waste plastic since 2018. So the sector, the recycling sector, and the whole country really are moving, making a lot of changes. So now with now each country has to deal with their own waste plastic, but now there are still a lot of international trade on recycled plastic, and also like all the packagings and all the material used of plastic. So still a huge trade floor volume in globally. So there's a function of trade to promote plastic recycling is very important, especially now in this climate change, like country like China also announced carbon neutral by 2060. So now this brings more opportunities and potential for recycling sector that could have much carbon reduction. For recycling, we know that circular economy is a perfect approach of having this closed loop. But plastic is always not easy to recycle and to return, because many are used as single-use plastics, such as packaging and these in agriculture. Yeah, so it is very more important, like how to have the consumers to return it and back to the value chain, and how to empower the value chain of getting more and more important. So now the Chinese recycling sector, the entrepreneurs in this sector are making big efforts to have more low-value waste plastic to be collected and to be used, like a PET or HDPE and PP, and then having them to be sorted into different qualities, into different values, different levels, and then at the end, they are trying to make it more into high value, high added value products, like now also trying to make a direct, more short a closed loop, the more short path of a closed loop, such as making into from bottle to bottle, from textile to textile, from carpet to carpet. This really can save lots of resource consumption and make more direct shortcut of applications, which also means it really needs a much higher recycling system. The quality, like from bottle to bottle, these also need to be a close collection of bottles, PET bottles. From carpet to carpet needs to be more like a single material, or like made of also PET or HDPE. And also these needs the change from the upstream, from design side, to really have all these used as a single material and have also easy to separate. So, and also the policy level, the support is also very necessary, as China banned the imported plastic. So the recycling sector also need to set up their own recycling system, so where they can get the profits from this system. So policy level, like China is making, is having this non-waste city, and now to ban this single-use plastic all the policies and also to set up the green, circular and the low carbon is a system, all helping to the whole society to get involved. So now the Chinese sector now our business is having these more applications like collaborating with branding companies and to have more recycled improvement modification of plastic into a high value, like used in automobiles, in textile, to have these more high value added products. And now also textile and these single-use films can also be used to be cleaned, and then to have more is a cheap to have a cheaper cost of the sources. And also for Chinese recycling system, also we are also the largest sector in the world. So we are also also going abroad a lot. Like many Chinese business are investigating in Southeast Asia and also in Europe and US and Japan. Also, they are having these labeling marine, like to save to reduce more marine pollutions, and also. The most significant sector is our recycling machine equipment manufacturing sector, which is also exported like over 160 countries in the world. So now for the media and the lower level of all these machines equipments are mainly made in China, and also some Chinese companies manufacturing business can also have some high advanced level into more high qualities. But this is not enough. It needs the whole chain to be connected with policies like and also the from design side, from technology, and the supply chain are making changes. So for further collaboration, we feel like all the stakeholders to collaborate is very important. So we need to, and for the global trade of these plastic is used in all everywhere in our lifestyle. So we need to really set up the platform with the digital quantity like measures. So here, like carbon reduction standards labels will be important, as they have relevant with the carbon reduction, and also can be linked very much to the carbon market. So I think in the future we work on this to have more digitalized platform to promote recycled plastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zhang. I think that yeah, you spoke from China practice point of view. I mean, as you mentioned, China is one of the largest plastic producers, but also users, and of course also, I think the policy now China's government taking like a few years, 2 years, 3 years back, that not taking plastic baggage and luggage and things like that is really important, and now it's very consensus. I think something that if Chinese government has made the mind to do, it's really can turn things around. I'm also very pleased to see actually President Xi mentioned at the UN General Assembly just recently that China is no longer building fossil fire power plants outside China. So that's a great commitment. So I really hope that with China as the biggest plastic producing country, but also now we are very interested to have international consensus to build up this preventing plastic pollution international consensus. That's really important. That's exactly the discussion we're having now to really build up this consensus. So thank you, Dr. Zhang. And now I would like to hear from a business representative, Ms. Judy Russell. I mean, you representing a well-known multinational. And so how does the CSR and plastic best practices applied? And And lastly is plastic corporate strategy and of course plastic policy input from industry. So we'd love to know all those from industry point of view. We had the ambassador saying from a government, from international agency. We have the Caroline mentioned from from academic, and of course we have Dr. John talk about from an association point of view, but and NGO maybe now it's industry, which I think all the players are important. We cannot live without them. So now Ms. Russell, your turn, please.
Thanks very much, Dr. Wang. It's a pleasure to join you today. As you noted in your introduction, I'll talk a little bit about our corporate strategy and how Nestle sees the question of managing plastics footprint, share some best practices, some that we've developed, some that we support and have joined, and look also at some reflections from where we sit as a multinational company that's active in 186 countries in terms of managing our supply chains, our footprint, and some reflections on how the trade system can support building a better system. In terms of the plastic packaging waste problem, I think that the ambassador and Dr. Birkbeck spoke very eloquently about the problem. This accumulation of plastic waste on land, in rivers, in oceans is endangering environmental sustainability, and it's an urgent priority for us and a responsibility that we take very seriously. Our long-term vision is that none of our packaging will end up in litter or in landfills. And we started working with other companies on corporate commitments. Two of the commitments we've made for 2025 are that 100% of our packaging will be recyclable or reusable, and we'll reduce our use of virgin plastics by 33% by 2025. For us, the challenge of packaging is very much a challenge of fit-for-purpose food-grade packaging. We need to deliver safe and nutritious food and beverages, and the packaging needs to be adapted to product and geography. Different products are sensitive to humidity, to temperature, climate variations, different routes to market, whether that may be an air-conditioned big box store, a local retailer, or a stand in a market. And we need to respond to national legislation and labeling requirements. So when we look at our strategy, this is in really three thematic areas: less packaging, better materials, and a better system. So with less packaging, we're working on packaging reduction and elimination. This is about sourcing new materials, particularly paper and fibers, sourcing recycled plastics, as well as designing packaging that uses less material overall. Secondly, we're looking at reusable packaging systems. How can we deliver packaging that used to be single serving, actually in a single serving reusable container, a multi-serving reusable container, or even bulk refill? And this requires significant rethink of supply chains and reverse logistics. And in both of those areas, there are opportunities for the trade community. The middle theme, better materials, this is about materials innovation for recycling and also supporting composting of organic waste. We design for recycling with a shift both to paperization to facilitate recycling in the paper or fiber stream, or in some cases, for some paper materials that are very heavy in natural fibers, even in the composting stream where it's accepted by industrial composters. We're also looking, as Dr. Zhang alluded, to designing multi-material plastics, redesigning them into single mono-material plastics to facilitate sorting and recycling. And we've invested, this is a first in the industry, in a research institute with 50 researchers in the Nestle Institute for Packaging Sciences, specifically focusing on materials innovation to ensure a better footprint for our packaging. And the third thematic area, the better system, there we're looking at recycling and waste management infrastructure, collection, sorting, recycling at scale, as well as external advocacy to transform the policy landscape. We've built partnerships in dozens of countries around the world to support plastic neutrality, or collecting on a voluntary basis the same amount of plastic every year through our partnership programs as we put on the market with our sales. And lastly, in the better system, we also recognize that we all need to rethink our behaviors. This is about shifting our mindset, and we need to look at how can we engage consumers on this journey? How can we develop new partnerships with retailers to ensure that more sustainable solutions are on their shelves and offered to consumers? Because sometimes those solutions require more space or different dispensing systems. And lastly, with our own work in-house, employee education, ensuring that our employees are not only informed but can become ambassadors for this transition. And if I share it from a contextual reflection, Nestle's made two other major commitments. One of them is our 2050 commitment to net zero emissions for our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. This commitment to net zero is requiring substantial changes across our supply chain in all countries of the world that we're active. Secondly, 2 weeks ago, we announced our commitment to regenerative agriculture. And this regenerative journey is something we're starting. We know we don't have all the answers, but we wanted to open the door to working with partners around the world, looking at how we can move beyond sustainability to making regenerative agriculture the basis of our thinking for all of these systemic decisions, so that we can ensure that not only from a climate perspective can we stabilize, but from an agricultural and soil health perspective, Nestle's a positive contributor to a sustainable future for food production. In the interest of time, I'll just make some brief comments on best practices. We are a participant in a series of design rules for packaging, which if you're not familiar with, I highly recommend. The Consumer Goods Forum's Golden Design Rules. And these packaging objectives focus on eliminating problematic or unnecessary packaging, increasing recycling value for packaging types that are being recycled at scale today, increasing the value in future recycling systems for systems that haven't yet been built, improving the environmental performance of business-to-business packaging that's used in the trade system, and improving consumer communications. And so there are 9 different specific design rules which are available at the Consumer Goods Forum website. Dozens of large multinational companies have signed up to support them. And we see this as a basis for responsible packaging design to support a full life cycle approach to the footprint of packaging. Secondly, Nestle has developed our own, what we call the negative list of packaging types that we are phasing out ourselves on a voluntary basis and that we've communicated. This may be ranging from oxo-degradable additives in some types of packaging, eliminating dark pigments such as carbon black, prioritizing clear packaging or white packaging to increase recycling value to ensure that our packaging, if it goes into a recycling system, is something that a municipal waste handler will want to receive. We're also looking at a shift toward different combinations of paper and plastic to ensure if there is plastic in a paper product, the percentage is low enough that it's attractive in the paper recycling stream. So those are a highlight of some very specific design rules that now are changing how we design our packaging for every market around the world to start this transition to ensure that more and more of our packaging will be not only recyclable or reusable, but actually will be attractive. Maybe I'll leave most of my recommendations to later, but I wanted to highlight one that Carolyn had mentioned, which is this question of how the trade system can support. I think there are opportunities already at the national level for individual countries, for example, to stop the importation of mixed waste. That's one step that any country can take to support a healthy recycling system and infrastructure development. With RTAs, we also see opportunities to prioritize certain materials or deprioritize others, like we've chosen to do on a voluntary basis with our negative list, to ensure that non-recyclable materials are not being accepted and that countries are not in a difficult position to manage materials they have no recycling infrastructure for. And lastly, on the HS code level, we are very interested in following the work that's being done, not only to have HS codes that exist today for plastic packaging that's empty and being transported to another country for an import, but the opportunity to have HS codes that include tracking packaging materials that may have chocolate milk or soy milk or pea milk or veggie burgers or bouillon cubes wrapped in them as they transit across the world, that we know how is that food product being wrapped and what is being imported into a country that ultimately needs to be accepted by the waste management system. I have some other reflections I'd be happy to share later, but in the interest of our desire to hear questions from the audience, I'll end my remarks here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Julie. Yeah, I know that Ambassador, Blackman has probably some time pressing, but I think that overall we have already 4 speakers give a very good cover up of the issue. But we have some questions, of course. So we have a few on platform, but also from myself, I also have a question. Maybe before Ambassador leave, I'd like to ask that you've been dedicated to the international development for more than 15 years. And so what are the major economic obstacles for developing countries to handle this plastic problem, according to your knowledge and experience? And of course, also WTO trying to strike a balance between economic growth and, of course, environmental sustainability. And then if this plastic solution, how can we really build into this global trade policy? And of course, we have international conventions, agreements that solve this problem, like Brazil Convention and Stockholm Convention, but they're mostly dealing with regulatory plastic waste rather than promoting plastic trade. So if WTO wants to set up some new rules on plastic trade, so what are the how does it enable plastic trade policy to integrate with the above conventions? So we would like to pick your wisdom, Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much. I'll attempt to answer all three questions in one go. At the heart of all three, though, I think there has to be a relook to see what is the framework guiding the use of plastics, particularly in the aspects of trade. And then when you put the microscope towards, for example, developing countries, many of the countries currently, and sadly, and I think the point that Jody was making, is that a lot of the plastic end up, because of trade, in countries, in circumstances where those countries don't have the facilities or capacity, whether technical or financial, to be able to treat to the plastic after the initial use. Now, when you talk about the circular economy, for example, it is a huge industry. It is where we need to go. But there has to be also a level of development assistance for many countries who simply cannot afford to do so, because the cost of shifting your economy from what it was to what it should be is incredibly high. But when the governments have, of course, budgetary constraints and other considerations to make, these things often go on the back burner, not for any lack of motivation, but simply the capacity to do so. In terms of the issue of the conventions and trade, and getting it mainstreamed into, I think the WTO, for example, cannot do it alone. Governments in that configuration cannot do it alone. Of course, the WTO is a regulator of global trade, but a lot of it has to do with the private sector coming on board, which they're already doing, but coming on board even more, because, and I think the point has to be made very clearly, to move into the direction where we wanted to go with plastics and ensuring that the environment is not harmed, there has to be a shift in how do we produce these things. And it goes back also to the inventors. And I think that the point Jody was making with regards to the Institute is very good, but how do you also magnify that across the world? Because if you're going to shift from what we currently have, the product still must be fit for purpose, must still meet market entry requirements, and not be substandard in any way. So it will call for a level of ingenuity. Equally, the environmentalists also have to ensure that the new products coming out that will be replacing what we were using before must not cause any further harm. So there's a whole of stakeholder approach, if I should use that term, that has to take place and take place very, very soon. Because over the last year, believe it or not, whilst in one respect, many of our countries have experienced a breathing space, as it were, because of COVID, because of reduced demand, a lot of our landfills, parks, lakes have been filled with a lot of plastics because of the heightened use of online services. Goods are arriving in plastic packages. So that, again, it comes back to that balance that we have to strike with all of our stakeholders. Unfortunately, I have to run to another engagement, but I really want to say that I'm really heartened by the discussions. I enjoyed the interventions of the other three panelists, and to you, Chair, thank you very much. And to our listeners, I hope that I was able to contribute to the discourse this morning.
Thank you, Ambassador Blackman. You made a very good contribution to our discussion. So this is really important to hear from your view as well. So we'll continue our discussion with our remaining panelists. Of course, we have that we have two questions that I picked from our platform. They talk about how does the plastic trading factor in the overall WTO reform agenda, and also given the current predicament of the multilateral trading system is facing, what are some of practical small steps that government and non-government actors can take to advance the plastic agenda? So that's a general question that I got. But I'd also, this is probably to all of our panelists. And then there's another one is how will the ongoing, we have this, geopolitical issues that can, really slowing down the multilateral system, how WTO can really get its act together to promote that. So those are two questions I got, for all our panelists to think about. But I'd also like to go to Dr. Caroline Brigback as well. As Ambassador mentioned, there are several conventions addressing plastic problem, but you lead a partnership program between the Graduate Institute and UNDP. And so can you tell us the roles that WTO play as one of the most important organizations in global governance of trade in addressing the problem of plastic, and in what ways, organizations like yours and others can collaborate with WTO to tackle that problem? And also the climate change summit is COP26 is happening, and what are the increasingly hot topic? This plastic is really getting hot, and so what way do you think that the new plastic economy is compatible with the target of addressing the climate change, that also the green economy that we're promoting? Dr. Brigback, your turn, please.
Well, thank you so much. A great set of questions. The first one to say, just on the question of the role of the WTO on environment, I think that one of the most exciting things in the last 18 months is, despite all of the